My hands don't shake anymore. First time I held one of these, an arquebus they call it, Tanegashima, matchlock, whatever word you want. My hands shook so bad I couldn't get the powder in the pan straight. That was 3 years ago. Tonight they're steady. Tonight I need them steady. I'm no samurai, no family name worth writing down, no armor worth the name either. Just a padded jacket, a straw hat, and a gun I was handed because someone decided farmers could learn to point a stick that spits fire faster than they could learn to swing a sword. There's 3,000 of us like that in this camp tonight, give or take. Nobody's counted exactly. Nobody counts men like me exactly. Tomorrow, the finest cavalry in Japan is going to ride straight at where I'm standing. That's not a guess. That's the plan. Theirs, not ours. I didn't choose this life so much as get folded into it. My family worked rice paddies outside a Mikawa village, same as their fathers had, and the same as I would have, if not for a lord needing bodies faster than he could raise proper samurai. That's the strange thing about this age we're living through. Armies used to mean a few hundred mounted warriors and whoever they could afford to arm. Now they mean tens of thousands, and most of those thousands are men like me, pulled off farms in the growing season and handed a spear or, if you're unlucky or lucky, depending how the day goes, one of these guns. Training took months. Loading a matchlock properly, powder, ball, wadding, priming the pan, all of it without setting your own sleeve on fire. That's not instinct. That's drilled in until your hands do it without your head getting in the way. I was slow at first. Everyone is. The men who stayed slow didn't last long enough to get fast. Nobody back home would recognize what I've become. I'm not sure I do either, some nights. We've been on the road 8 days by the time word reaches the column that we're not just marching to punish a raid, we're marching to break a siege. A fort called Nagashino has been surrounded 3 weeks now. 500 men penned inside, walls made of wood and not much stone, food running out day by day. I've never seen it. I know it the way everyone in this column knows it, through rumor passed soldier to soldier down the line of march, growing a little in the telling each time it moves. The man in command in there, they say, already told his soldiers he'd cut his own belly open before he watched them starve to nothing. That's the kind of promise a commander makes when he means to keep it, and word of a promise like that travels faster than any order could. Oda Nobunaga's banners lead the column. Tokugawa Ieyasu's men march beside them, allies bound by more than convenience at this point. Everyone's watched them fight side by side too many times now to call it anything less than trust. 30-some thousand of us, moving toward a narrow strip of land with a name I don't know yet. Shitaragahara. By tomorrow night, I won't be able to forget it. There's a bigger shape to this war than I usually let myself think about, marching in the middle of it with a gun on my shoulder. Nobunaga's spent years now pulling one province after another under his banner, and the Takeda clan is about the only power left in this half of the country strong enough to say no to him and mean it. Nagashino Castle sits right on the border between Takeda land and Tokugawa land, which is why Katsuyori wanted it and why Ieyasu can't afford to lose it. Men like me don't get told the whole strategy. We get told which direction to march and we go, and mostly that's enough to know. None of us in the relief column have seen inside those walls, but the accounts that come out afterward paint a picture worth stopping on. 500 men, penned in 3 weeks, rationing down to portions that keep a man alive without keeping him strong. Water's not the problem. There's a well inside. Food is. By the time the siege breaks, they're eating what a full larder would have thrown out months before, and doing it in silence, because the commander posted there, Okudaira Saramasa, has already made clear that whining doesn't buy anyone an extra mouthful. He's the one who made that promise about cutting his own belly open, not theater. Men who'd served under him longer said they believed he meant every word of it, and that belief is half of why the garrison held as long as it did. Instead of opening the gates the first week, the food ran short. The story that reaches us the night before the fighting gets passed around every fire in camp like something too good not to repeat, And for once, I believe every word of it. A man from the besieged garrison, Torii Suneemon, they say his name was, volunteered to slip past the Takeda lines in the dark, swam a river current strong enough to drown a careless man, ran through country crawling with enemy patrols, alone, to reach Nobunaga and Ieyasu and beg them for the relief force that's now marching, that I'm now part of. He got his answer. Help was coming. Then he turned around and went straight back the way he came, to carry that answer home to men who'd started counting the days they had left in single digits. He didn't make it back clean. Takeda scouts caught him within sight of the castle walls. And here's the part that stops every conversation around the fire when it gets told. The Takeda commanders offered him his life, on one condition: stand where the garrison could see him. Shout that no help was coming. Tell them to surrender. He shouted the opposite. "Help is coming," he called out, loud enough for his own people to hear it over the enemy soldiers holding him. Hold on a little longer. They killed him for it, right there where his own comrades could watch it happen and carry the sight with them. I never knew this man. Never will. But I'm marching toward that fort because of a promise he paid for with his life. And that's not nothing to carry into a battle of my own. We reach the valley 2 days before the fighting starts, a tight strip of ground maybe 2 kilometers across, hemmed in by wooded hills on one side and a shallow stream, the Rengogawa, cutting through the middle of it. Rice paddies either side, mud that sucks at your sandals with every step. The kind of ground that slows a man down and slows a horse down worse. Nobunaga rides the ground himself before he says a word to anyone. Picks the narrowest point of the whole basin, where the Takeda cavalry won't have room to build up speed or spread wide enough to use their numbers. Then he gives an order that sets half the camp muttering. Dig in, build a fence. We're not going to charge anyone tomorrow. We're going to stand behind wood and let them come to us. Some of the samurai officers don't care for that plan. Standing and waiting isn't how their fathers or their fathers' fathers won battles worth singing about. Glory rides forward. It doesn't crouch behind a fence built by farmers. Nobunaga doesn't ask them to like the plan. He asks them to build it. And by evening, every man in camp who isn't standing watch has a length of timber over his shoulder. It rains the whole night before. Hard, cold. The kind of rain that turns a war camp into a swamp inside an hour. We're out in it anyway, hauling posts, driving them into wet ground by torchlight, lashing them into a barrier that by morning runs close to 2 kilometers along our side of the stream, built in 3 overlapping rows with gaps wide enough, here and there, for a counterattack to pass through when the moment comes. My hands are raw from rope by the time we're done, blisters under blisters. Someone jokes that we've built the world's most expensive scarecrow. Nobody laughs long. A scarecrow doesn't need to stop a horse at full gallop. The rain does something else too, something that runs through the ranks as fact before morning even breaks. Katsuyori, the young lord leading the Takeda army, son of a man every soldier on this field grew up hearing stories about, is counting on that rain. Wet powder doesn't fire. If 3,000 arquebuses are soaked through by dawn, they're not guns anymore. They're 3,000 clubs standing behind a fence, waiting for cavalry that won't be stopped by clubs. I check the oiled cloth over my own gun for the 10th time that night. Dry so far. I don't know about the others, and there's nothing to do about that except keep checking my own. Across the stream, in a camp none of us can see clearly through the trees and the rain. The story that reaches us afterward is that the Takeda commanders spent that same night arguing. Older generals, men who'd served Katsuyori's father for decades, men whose names carry weight even on our side of the water, telling their young lord this ground is wrong. Too narrow, too easy for a larger enemy to hold and bleed you against. Pull back, they say. Don't hand 30,000 men a field built to trap you in. Katsuyori doesn't pull back. His cavalry broke the Tokugawa badly at a place called Shitaragahara 2 years before, broke a force that outnumbered them, and he's carrying that memory into tomorrow like a promise the past made him. He's young. He's confident in the way men are confident when the last big gamble paid off. And when he looks at a wet wood fence manned by farmers holding guns that might not even fire in this weather, he doesn't see a wall. There's a version of that night that gets repeated among our own officers afterward, second-hand and probably shaped in the telling. That one of the old generals, the ones who'd followed his father from the beginning, finally told him plainly that this wasn't a battle worth having, that pride was about to spend men his father spent 30 years collecting. Whether Katsuyori answered him or just walked away, nobody on our side of the water can say for certain. What we know is what happened at dawn, and dawn is the only answer that matters once soldiers are already standing in formation waiting for an order. He sees an opening, and in the morning he's going to ride his best men straight through where he thinks it is. Morning comes gray, the rain finally thinning to a mist that clings low over the paddies. I'm in the second rank behind the fence, close enough to smell wet mud and matchcord smoke from 100 men checking their weapons at once. Close enough to hear a man 3 positions down praying under his breath, words I don't recognize and don't ask about. Ahead of me, past the gaps in the palisade, past the narrow stream, the tree line on the far hills starts to move. Not scouts, not a probe sent to test our nerve. The whole line, banners and all, shifting forward at once. Someone passes the word down without needing to raise his voice. We all see it at the same time anyway. They come at a walk first, then a trot, then something faster than either. Banners snapping, horses already lathered from the wet ground underfoot, riders who've broken armies twice their size before and see no reason today's any different. The sound reaches us before they do. Hooves through mud, low and heavy, like the ground itself is being struck again and again. Someone shouts the order. I don't remember lifting the gun to my shoulder. I remember the smell, sulfur and wet wood and my own sweat. And then the whole front rank of the fence goes off almost together, and the world turns into a kind of noise I can't separate into single sounds anymore. Here's what I can tell you for certain, and what I can't. What's certain? Guns went off, again and again, close enough together in time that no rider crossing that stream got more than a few strides before the next crack of fire found him. What I can't tell you, because people who studied this battle for centuries after still argue about it, is whether we really fired in 3 clean rotating rows, the way it gets told in the stories afterward, each line stepping back to reload while the next stepped forward like a machine built out of men. Some who've looked hard at the old records since say that detail only shows up decades later, written by men who weren't standing where I was standing. Loading one of these guns in the middle of a cavalry charge, hands shaking, smoke thick enough to taste. I can tell you, it never once felt clean or rehearsed to me. It felt like every man finding whatever rhythm kept him alive one more breath. Whatever the truth of the formation, the effect on the field wasn't in any doubt at all. Horses went down screaming, riders pitched forward into the mud, and behind the ones falling, more horses were already coming, already too close to stop. Word moves through our lines in pieces, the way news does in a fight nobody standing in it can see the whole of. Yamagata Masakage, one of old Takeda Shingen's finest, a name every soldier on this field grew up hearing spoken with something close to awe, goes down leading his men straight into the gunfire, because that's the only way he knew how to lead. Baba Nobufusa, another of the old guard, stays back to cover a retreat that hasn't even been ordered yet, buying time with his own life for a young lord who wouldn't listen to him the night before. Naito Masatoyo falls the same day, another of the veterans who'd counseled caution and got ignored for it. 3 names like that, gone in the space of one long afternoon. These aren't strangers dying somewhere out past the edge of what I can see. These are the men the whole Takeda army was built around, the ones younger soldiers looked to when the noise got too loud to think straight. When names like that start falling, something goes out of an army that no courage left in the ranks behind them can put back in. There's a gap after the first charge breaks, riders wheeling back through their own dead and dying to reform somewhere past the tree line. And for a moment, the noise drops low enough that I can hear my own breathing again. Ragged, too fast. I reload without thinking about it, hands moving through the same sequence they've drilled 1,000 times. Powder, ball, wadding, priming the pan. And I'm not even finished before the ground starts shaking again. The second wave doesn't look any different going in. Same courage, same speed, same banners. It doesn't survive any better either. If anything, the fence has done its work too well by now. The ground in front of it is already thick with fallen horses and men. Obstacles the next riders have to pick their way through or jump, either one costing them the speed that made this cavalry so feared in the first place. Nobunaga built more than a wall of wood last night. He built a field that gets harder to cross with every wave that dies trying. I keep asking myself, even now, years later, what I would have done in Katsuyori's place, watching 2 charges fail and still having a third to order. Pull back and live with the shame of it, or send the last wave in and hope the story turns. If you'd been the one giving that order, would you have called the third charge or held it back? Tell me in the comments, I want to know. They come a third time anyway. I don't know if that's courage or a refusal to believe what the first 2 charges already proved. Maybe it's both. Maybe by the third wave, the men riding it already know, and ride in anyway because turning back now means admitting the day's already lost. And some men would rather die not admitting that than live having said it out loud. I lose count of shots fired somewhere in the middle of it. Not from confusion, from simple exhaustion. The kind where your arms keep moving through the motion without your mind tracking the number anymore. Each wave is smaller than the one before it, though it takes a while for that to register properly, the way you don't notice a fire dying down while you're still standing close enough to feel the heat of it. By the time the last charge finally breaks and doesn't reform, the ground in front of our fence isn't a field anymore. I won't describe it further than that. Some things don't need the words, and I don't want to hand them to you. Sometime past noon, the order finally comes down our own line, advance. After a whole day of standing still, of letting the enemy come to us, we're moving forward for the first time, through the gaps left in our own fence for exactly this moment, across the churned stream, into a retreat that's already turning into something closer to a collapse. I see Takeda soldiers running who I know, just from the way they carry themselves, were never raised to run from anything in their lives. That's a strange thing to watch happen to a man. Not satisfying, the way I half expected it might feel after a day like this one. Just strange, and a little sad in a way I don't examine too closely while it's still happening around me. Nobunaga's cavalry takes over where we can't follow, chasing the broken Takeda formations back toward the hills they came from that morning, cutting down men who'd have been unstoppable 8 hours earlier, and are now just soldiers running for a mountain pass with an army at their backs. Katsuyori himself is pulled off the field alive, by men who die making sure of it, guarding a retreat that costs the Takeda clan most of what made it dangerous in the first place. I stay behind with the guns, because that's what a man like me does once the cavalry work starts. Hold position, tend to whatever's left standing near the fence. Help carry off the men from our own side who didn't get to walk away from this. There's fewer of us than there were this morning. Not as few as on the other side of that stream, but fewer. By evening, the counting starts. The grim kind nobody enjoys, but everyone needs done. Officers moving the field with lists, marking which banners haven't come back to camp, which names get crossed off before their families even know to grieve. I help carry a boy no older than me to a row already too long, and I don't know his name, and I never will. And that bothers me more than anything I saw during the fighting itself. The dying happens fast. The counting takes all night. Katsuyori survives that day. He won't survive the 7 years after it. I'll hear, much later, in pieces the way you hear most things once you're an old man and the war's moved on without you, that it ends in the mountains near a place called Tenmokuzan, a lord with a handful of followers left, no allies willing to shelter him anymore, his own family gone before him by his own hand rather than see them taken. The clan his father built into the most feared name in the country simply stops existing after that. Nobody rebuilds it. Historians who count these things more carefully than I ever could still argue over the numbers from that day. How many guns we really had, whether it was 3,000 or fewer, whether the Takeda force was 15,000 or closer to 20. I can't settle that argument for you. I only know what I carried and what I fired, and how many times I reloaded before my arm stopped answering properly. What I do know is this: cavalry like that, the kind that broke armies twice its size, the kind whole provinces built their reputations around, didn't survive that day the way it walked into it. Something shifted in how wars in this country get fought, and it shifted because of a fence built by farmers in one night of rain, and guns handed to men whose names nobody thought worth writing down. Nobunaga doesn't stop after that day either. Province after province falls to him and to the men who learned to fight the way he taught us to fight. Guns and fortification and patience over the old glory of the charge, right up until his own death 7 years later at the hands of one of his own generals. A betrayal that has nothing to do with cavalry or guns, and everything to do with the kind of enemies a man makes climbing that high, that fast. It's Hideyoshi and then Ieyasu who finish what Nobunaga started, who carry that lesson from this muddy field all the way to a country finally unified under one roof a generation later. I never met either of them. I only know I stood in the field where the old way of winning wars started dying, and I lived to walk home from it. I think about the fence sometimes. Wet wood, raw hands, one long night of hauling timber that felt like busy work until it wasn't. Nobody writes songs about the men who drove those posts into the mud. But I was one of them, and I know what stopped that cavalry, and it wasn't magic, and it wasn't luck. It was that fence, a gun I was scared to hold 3 years earlier, and a night none of us slept through. That's not the kind of story that makes it into the old tales. I'm telling it anyway.